Roosevelt's Garrett has announced that the country's intention to accede to the Caribbean Court of Justice as the final court of appeal, in preference to the UK's Privy Council. What makes now the right time?
Well, the Privy Council has served the Caribbean very well. Yeah. We have had sterling judgments emanate from the Privy Council. However, I think the general view is that for there to be true independence of the former colonial countries, that you need to have your own final court of appeal dealing with your appeals in the civil and criminal sphere. Dominica signed the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice in 2003, and the court itself was established in 2005. So I think it's more than time that Dominica adopt the Caribbean Court of Justice as its final court of appeal. You will appreciate that all the members of CARICOM, when they signed on to the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice, it was envisaged then that the intention of the Caribbean Court of Justice was not only to deal with matters involving the treaty establishing CARICOM in its original jurisdiction, but also to serve as the final court of appeal for the CARICOM countries. So more than 6-7 years on, it is more than time that that step be taken, certainly for Dominica.
And as a lawyer yourself, why do you think that only Barbados, Belize and Guyana currently have the CCJ as their highest court of appeal?
Well, I really can't speak for the other countries. I believe that each country has its own challenges in relation to adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice as its final court. In some countries, a referendum is required by their constitution. In others, it's not. A decision has been taken by the OECS heads of government that the countries of the OECS take the necessary steps to adopt the Caribbean Court of Justice as the final court of appeal. In some of those territories, a referendum is necessary. In others, it is not. In Dominica, it is not necessarily required. And we are moving forward with that.
Yeah, it sounds like you've responded to the next question I was going to ask about the referendum. Yeah, I was going to ask you whether you believe that such important decision needs to be undertaken in the form of a referendum.
I don't think that it needs to. Our constitution envisaged that it was not necessary, that it could take place, but it was not necessary. And yes, I think that it is important for there to be debate on it, and there has been debate on it over the years. Even when the decision was being made for the countries of the CARICOM region to enter into the agreement establishing the court, there was discussion, great discussion on it at that time. And so it is good to have debate on an important issue as that, but I don't believe that it is necessary to have a referendum.
Do you think that the Dominican people and the Caribbean community in general know enough about acceding to the CCJ?
It would seem, based on comments that I have heard, that perhaps there isn't enough awareness of our Caribbean people as to the benefits of having the Caribbean Court of Justice as the final court of appeal, and also in knowing how the structure of the court was set up to ensure that not only do we attract persons of sufficient caliber to sit as judges, but also to insulate it from any perceived political interference. And so I think that there is need to continue the education process in that regard.
Okay. And do you think that the CCJ will truly facilitate access to justice for ordinary persons? Okay.
I think it already has. Based on information that was provided from the Caribbean Court of Justice and on the statistics, it would seem that for the courts of Barbados, Belize, and Guyana, who have already acceded to the Caribbean Court of Justice as their final court of appeal on civil and criminal matters, that there are more citizens accessing the final appellate court than when those territories were in fact members of used the Privy Council as its final court of appeal. The Caribbean Court of Justice as well is an itinerant court in that it can, to facilitate matters, it can actually travel to the islands to hear matters. So it makes it more accessible for persons. Whereas with the Privy Council as a final court of appeal, persons would have to go through the expense of getting lawyers in London to argue their appeals. Although lawyers from the Caribbean are also able to argue their appeals before the Privy Council, it is a much more expensive process, even for the litigants themselves to come up to the UK to have their appeals heard. So you find that for a lot of citizens, their final court of appeal was for the OECS, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and for the other territories, their court of appeal. Having the CCJ be in Trinidad and also being an itinerant court, it means that persons would have greater access to the court as a final court of appeal. And from what is the statistics emanating from the court, it looks like that is in fact the case.
Can the CCJ remain truly independent of the island's politics and politicians?
I think the structure that has been developed for the Caribbean Court of Justice has ensured that it will be free from all political interference. Because when you think of how can the politicians interfere in the court, one of the ways they could do so is in having an influence on how the judges are appointed to the court, or which judges are appointed to the court, the tenure on the court, and the budget of the court. Now, with the structure that has been employed for the CCJ, the possibility of political interference, I think, has been removed. I would not even say minimized. I would say that it has been removed, in that the judges who are appointed by the court are appointed by the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission. The appointment of the members of that commission are free from political interference. The members of the commission, for example, I think they consist of 11 members, with the president of the court being the chairperson, and then the other members being appointed jointly by other organizations such as the bar associations and the Legal Services Commission and that sort of thing, Judicial and Legal Services Commission and so on. So you have a body to appoint judges that is free from political interference. You have security of tenure of the judges. The judges can only be removed by a tribunal that is specially appointed for that purpose. And you also have the budget of the court being free from political interference, because with the setting up of the CCJ, the agreement was that all of the countries would contribute to a special fund, which I believe was US 100 million. And that trust fund is to be used, the income from that to be used to manage the expenses of the court, including the payment of the judges and so on. So there is no possibility of the politician saying, okay, we're going to withhold the money from you, so therefore you will not be able to operate properly unless you do what we say. So you have a fund that is free from political interference, because the trust fund is being administered again by trustees who again are free from political interference. So I think that a model has been developed which, so far as is possible, has insulated the court from the possibility of political interference.
And just one final question. What is your vision of the Caribbean, or the CCJ being the final court of appeal in the Caribbean?
Well, what I see with the Caribbean Court of Justice being the final court of appeal is that persons will be able to access justice at a higher level, because you have a situation now where persons are not able to access that final court, and I think it will create greater satisfaction and confidence in the judicial system, where people feel that at the very highest level they can have their disputes settled, and the fact that the court can come to them, that they can access it, the fact that even in some instances matters can be dealt with by video conferencing and teleconferencing, all of that helps to improve the person's access to justice, people's ability to participate in the judicial process, because in the matters that come before the Caribbean Court of Justice are televised and uploaded on the net, so that persons can actually see matters being dealt with. So people will feel more a part of the process and feel a greater sense of satisfaction with the justice that they receive. I also understand that one of the mandates of the CCJ, one of their plans, is to the further education in relation to the Caribbean Court of Justice's benefits, and also with assisting in improving the justice system in the Caribbean. So I see it as a plus, any way that you look at it, for the Caribbean.
So I'd like to thank you, Your Excellency, for participating in this interview, and I do hope that we can continue with some good works in the future.
Thank you very much. Okay.